good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Big Local Podcast because we are Black, Global, and Local. And today I have a very special guest. If I started reading everything he has done, we might sleep here. But today I have a very interesting gentleman. He's not just any person, but he's also a big brother, a friend, and an author. And today I would like us to talk about, briefly look at the book he recently authored, which is We Don't Teach That at the University. And after reading this book, it's about 109 pages. It is very, very heavy, very, very exciting, very, very insightful. So I asked him to come and share some of his wisdom with us. And the gentleman today is Dr. Daniel Ruhweza. And if I read his accomplishments, let me just pick a few highlights. First and foremost, he's the President Emeritus of the Uganda Christian Law Fraternity. He has also worked as a senior lead consultant for prosecution policy. He's a Don at the Makerere University School of Law. He's an advocate. He's worked as an advocate. He's worked as a consultant for both global and local organizations, both with the government and private sector. So many things, so many things. But today he's here in the capacity of author, along other things. So, Dr. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's an honor and privilege to join you today on Black, Global, and Local. I like the sound of that, Black, Local, and Global. I look forward to a fruitful discussion with you as we exchange ideas about some of the things I touch about in the book. We don't teach that at the university, Confessions of the University Don.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was a bit hesitant when you told me I have a new book because I thought it was going to be like, I don't know how many pages, because I know your life is, it has been very eventful. So I thought to myself, will I have time to read like 3 whole, I don't know, encyclopedias? But I love the fact that it is short, precise, and you bring yourself to the table. That is something that is not very common. And it is indeed, there's so many things that we're not taught at the university. However, I would also like to think that maybe it's not just the university. This book is very rich, It's not just for university people. I think it should be something right from primary school. Slowly, we can break it down into bit sizes for children at different ages to understand. Because by the time we reach the university, a lot of our character has formed. But if we had known these things earlier, perhaps the life choices would have made going to the university, the schools we would have decided to go to for high school would have been different had we known some of these things. And I believe it's for everyone, parents, guardians, school head teachers, I don't know, politicians, anyone who's anyone should read this book. So just to start it off, I would like to know, because it's really an educational thing, what did education mean to you? One, as a child, as a young man, and now as a leader and a parent.
Thank you very much. That is a very rich question. So, growing up, I was never given any reasons as to why I was going to school. All I knew was you're going to go to school, and getting to school, nobody ever explained to me why an education is necessary, how long it is going to take, what comes out at the end of the day. And so I went to school probably because it was what was required of me. And as an obedient child, Apart from those days where I feigned the sickness so that I'll just stay at home and just chill out, or because I hadn't done homework over the weekend and I wanted to avoid the canes from the teachers, I decided, find a reason. I am ill,
Yeah. Mm.
um, and this really happened right through primary school, because I remember the good parts were when I would join the some of the co-curricular activities. I enjoyed some of the subjects. I enjoyed social studies. I enjoyed articulating words in English. But really, because nobody had ever talked to me about the necessity for education, why
Mm.
we do it at the end of the day, I just breezed through this thing. When opportunity came for me to do something otherwise, like chill out, like they say, with my friend instead of going for the afternoon class, I would do so. Had I
Mm.
known that this education is so critical for many things in my life, then maybe I would have taken it more seriously. But most of us just breezed through education, so that is childhood. Then then towards the end of my what you call primary education in Uganda, I've now gotten, to experience co-curricular activities like scouting, music,
Mm.
dance, and drama. You begin to make friends. You begin to relate with some of the subjects. You're starting to kind of think through. Maybe one day I'll become a veterinary doctor because I loved animals.
Mm.
Maybe I never had a conversation with my father regarding what he wanted me to become in future, and I don't blame him.
Mm.
He was a journalist. My mother is a nurse, and I was just there. No real guidance per se, because I guess they were also not guided, and maybe this conversation wasn't something they thought was necessary at the time. Maybe they
Important.
thought we are still too young. And it's
Mm.
only in secondary school, towards the end of my secondary school, that I started thinking about, how the places. I mean, right up to senior, my secondary four, or IGSE, I was still contemplating on becoming a veterinary doctor and a farmer because I loved the animals. I loved,
The
it was
flora
really
and
my passion.
fauna.
But at the same time, I was so taken up by history, literature, English, and I loved that. And slowly, you begin to hear stuff about the law. You're reading a bits and
Mm-hmm.
pieces about the law. But it was towards the end of secondary education that really conversations on career start happening. You know, so sometimes I wonder, if I had been advised much earlier, would I have become a better or different type of lawyer? Because I'm a
Mm.
lawyer right now. Would I have still pushed on to become the medical doctor? I mean, the veterinary doctor that I am. Because right now, as we talk, we are in a lockdown in Uganda, and veterinary services are viewed as essential services. Farming
Yes, they
services
are.
are viewed as essential services, and so those ones are allowed to go to work. Lawyers are told to keep home and work via Zoom. So it begins to show you what really matters in the world, what is really important and what is not. So I
Mm.
guess that was my journey, in the education that I received, and many of the ideas on what to do, when to do it, and so on, just came up because I picked up the phone. I remember making a last minute consultation with my mother because I had to choose between doing journalism like my dad or law. And so I call up my mom and say, "You just give me the final word on this one. Should I do journalism or should I do law?" And she says, "Do
So,
law," and gives me her reasons as to why I should do law. And I just
mm.
went and applied for a law degree.
Lo-
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Well, I guess that's the story of many of us Africans. They never tell you why you're going to school and how it's going to help your life. They're like, I've paid school fees, go and excel.
Yeah.
There isn't any deep explanation. And well, I guess right now it's changing. However, it was you're becoming a lawyer, doctor, I don't know, teacher. What were the other things? engineering, but they really, really
Yes.
never told us. So I can see your attitude started slowly changing along the way when you started interacting with people, when you started opening up, through all these activities. So I would
Mhm.
like to ask, in the book you talk about there's a section on attitude, and you've given us a background that you've always loved animals, you've always loved plants, you thought of being a vet, but now you're a lawyer. And as a lawyer, you say something about like science, so to speak, or numbers or math was never your thing. You never liked it. But after watching a series called Numbers, it really
Yes.
changed your attitude towards science. So I'd like to ask, what other aspects of science have you recognized as an important piece in your advocacy and education journey?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think in
Yeah.
Uganda, we have this whole thing of me, I'm an artist, so I stay in my artistic lane. Me, I'm a
Yes.
scientist, I stay in my lane.
Yeah.
But all these things are truly interconnected. So, for you, in your case, what are some of those other
Yes.
aspects of science that have told you, this is also important?
Yeah. So and that's a very important, very good question. Thank you for it. You see, we studied physics. We never connected the water heaters that we had in our dormitories with the study of physics. So,
Mm.
on the one hand, I recall an incident where I was boiling water. We used to call it a heater or a percolator or something. So it switched
Mm-mm.
on, but I did not see, are they called, the molecules moving in the water. So I wondered whether or not this thing is working. Is it warming up or not? And so what I did, I put my finger into the water and I got electrocuted. Well, not electrocuted. I got an electric shock, and
Oh
and
my
that's when
goodness.
it, and that's when you said, oops, my science classes, my physics classes should have told me, should have used the practical things that happen in our day-to-day student life to connect me with what is going on. But
Mm.
somehow in the dormitories, we were boiling water. We had switches on. You have all these electronic gadgets, radios, and all these. We used to have what we call the Walkmans. The
Yeah.
ones that and but we never connected those things, switching off of the main switch in case there's an a short circuit.
Short
We never
circuit.
connected those things with the study of physics that was in the classroom, you
Mm.
know. And it's only later on in life that these things start making sense to us. I say, oh, these electric diagrams that we are having and so on actually are connected with the day-to-day living that we have.
We
And
have.
so it made me realize that it was not in vain that I studied the sciences.
Mhm.
Um, it was not in vain that that I learned about electricity, because electricity is now part of my life. We because of some of the challenges we have with the supply of power. You either have solar systems, you
Yeah.
either have all these other things that
Biogas.
you are biogas, and what is this one that we use to keep power when power goes off, it switches on. um
The generators.
no, not the generator, the other one
Uh,
that has it, anyway, it slipped my mind.
mm.
But anyway, we use all these. When you go outside into the compound, you are changing bulbs, you're using more electric lines to add more lighting because of the greenery that is around, and so
Mhm.
on and so forth. How I wish all this stuff was made relevant to us. I remember asking now my father-in-law a question and said, all these mathematical equations that we were taught in um, in school, of what
In school.
relevance are they today to us? And then he started explaining to me how the aeroplane works, why it's important to have certain calculations to get certain things to do with projectiles and momentum and so on and so forth. But because these connections were never made, we never saw them, we ended up
Mm.
breezing through studying electricity and studying about the pendulums and so, but they just did not connect with us. And so today, to answer your question, I see everything science around what I do. My hand movements, bed support, the ability of a car to brake, inertia of motion, and all these things. Science is so part of everything we do that I wish these connections were made for us, and maybe that way we would have been able to see the relevance, appreciate the relevance, and then even fall in love with the subject. But before that, we are like, okay, what is all this? What is paper chromatography for? What is why must
Yeah,
I memorize the table, of
the
zinc,
tables.
and yeah, why should I memorize them? Of what use are they? Uh, how are they going to help me? But if those connections were made, then someone is able to then appreciate the subject much better. So to answer your question, I can really say that all around me now, I see science at work, and
Mm.
how I wish that connection was made for me at that time. You know, we probably would have become better scientists today.
Yeah,
Um,
that is true.
one of the things I see, for example, is in agriculture. Uganda is heavily reliant on agriculture. That
Yes.
and I think agriculture should have been made a compulsory subject for all of us, right up to our IGSE or senior for exams, because everyone now in lockdown is doing one bit of agriculture or another. You're
To
planting.
survive.
Uh, yes, the other day I showed some people um, uh, a seedling of a certain type of passion fruit. And these are
Mm-hmm.
educated folks. And I said, guys, what plant do you think this is? And they couldn't guess it,
Yeah.
because they are used to, we are used, not they, we are all used to buying stuff in the supermarket or in the market, but we may not
Yeah.
necessarily know where these things come from, and I am careful when I say that, because that has changed quite a bit, because many of us now are rearing some chickens,
Some
some goats,
rabbits,
yeah, right
goats here and
there. So
there.
because we realized that suddenly food must be cheaper, and we have to envision cheaper ways of accessing it. So we need to grow it, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So all around me, I see the science. How I wish this had been explained to us way back. Never know Uganda would have more scientists today
Mm.
than it has right now.
And I think, just to add on to everything you've said, again, when it comes to the whole thing of these are scientists, these are artists, I think it's important for us not to have those very clear boundaries because everything is
Yeah.
interconnected. Personally,
Yeah.
I am a scientist, but after this whole time I've been studying, and I was trying to think about where to go after this. Where am I headed? What should I be doing after this? And I had a conversation with my professor. Actually, no, it wasn't a conversation, but he was trying to introduce me to someone for an internship. And in his email, he said he wrote me a very good recommendation. And somewhere in there, he said, but Moronge is more of a liberal, she's more of a liberal arts scientist, right? So in my mind, I had been struggling, really struggling, thinking to myself, yes, I did civil engineering, but I'm not a big fan of the calculations. I'm not a big fan of, okay, let's go construct this house, let us do calculations for that road. That is not what excites me. However, I'm more into like things like policy. I'm more into things like how do we create systems? How do we create a system that enables us to come to this point in, say, maybe uh, bringing to people, stakeholders together so that we discuss about that transportation project. You see, so for me, unlike you, I've also rediscovered my artistic side, which is, I'm very much interested in policy right now. So how I wish they wouldn't give us those clear boundaries back in school and, just tell us about life and we
Yeah,
decide on our
yeah,
own where we'd like to go. And so that brings me to my next question. As you
yeah.
said, you
And
didn't
and
have a
maybe
lot
just
of.
to chip into that,
Mhm.
one of the people I really admire is called Dr. Magara. He runs the Pan Dental Clinics, and he's since gone in to do a lot of work in leadership and so on and so forth. And he has written a book coming out of his PhD in leadership from one of the American universities, and his book is on think tanks.
Uh-huh.
I think he's exposed us to the fact that we really need to have more think tanks, invest more into just the brain work before policies come through. Um, Recently Uganda approved a new budget where it removed the over the top tax for services like
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
use of WhatsApp and all these other things. But this policy has been on, and people were being charged for
And
using
people have been suffering,
yes, and
you
so
know.
many Ugandans had just turned to using VPN, uh, virtual networks, to be able to access social media. And so the way the tax had been introduced, the thinking for it, the way the politicians were speaking, it was seen more as hindering our ability to communicate, as
Yes,
opposed to the fact that we want to collect more funding, we want to collect more taxes for
more
these
taxes.
purposes. Yeah, but the thinking process, I think, is very critical. Right now at Makerere,
I agree.
the science lecturers are paid slightly more than we, the artists, and and I personally think it's not necessarily true that sciences are better than arts. I
I
think there
agree.
must be a convergence of ideas
I agree.
whereby science begins to appreciate arts and arts
Yes.
begin to appreciate science. So yeah, but go ahead.
I completely agree with you. We need to do a lot more research, the background, what informs the decisions we take in our countries. So that is, I completely agree with you when you talk about the think tanks. So to bring it back, you've been talking about how you really didn't have a lot of career guidance. Everything you've discovered as you've grown up is purely by yourself. What are some of the 2 to 3 fundamentals you think we should change in our education system, as regards the teachers and also the students? Because I believe this education thing we are constantly talking about, crying about, is not entirely on the teachers, but also sometimes
Yeah,
the students
yeah,
and
yeah.
their parents. Those are two very important stakeholders, and I believe their attitudes need to change. So, from your experience, what are some of the 2 to 3 things that the education system needs to change as regards
Yeah.
teachers and as regards students, aka parents?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So in the book, we don't teach that at the university. Towards the end, I make some kind of recommendations,
Yes.
and I call out to key stakeholders, or the few that I have identified as stakeholders, to be able to go beyond. And this is my chapter 10, way forward. And basically, I'm saying that, look, lecturers need to realize that the way we were taught, the circumstances under which we were educated and brought up, are not necessarily the circumstances under which the current crop of students we are teaching have been brought up.
Mhm.
The students that we have now are classified as millennials, and some science has been put in to study the millennial and this is not like to give excuse, but to say that it is the truth that they've been brought up in a
Different.
different way. We guys can be called Generation X, who have been raised by the baby boomers, and each group has a certain characteristics that are working for them. Um, the type of music we listen to was different. The type of gadgets we played with are different. The our heroes were different. The
Yeah.
economics of our time was different, and so we must, as first of all, just get the mindset that says, I am teaching a new generation, and I have to be able to communicate what I'm teaching in a language that they understand.
They understand.
Secondly, all stakeholders must come in. Education, the Ministry of Education needs to just redo the policy by involving everybody. So there's a lot of
Mm.
work that's needed. Bring all the religious institutions together, because the religious institutions inform certain mindsets. And
Yes.
sometimes even before a child starts formal education, the religious
Yes. Yes.
institutions have already started imputing certain ideas into the young mind. So we need to have them. We need to have traditional institutions, because I think at some point in time in Uganda, we are now being encouraged to teach our students first in their local languages, and then they can articulate in the English language. And that comes with its own challenges as well. So uh, religious institutions are so easily, not religious, traditional institutions are so easily ignored,
Yes.
but they have a fundamental role they play, in the naming of children, in the behavior of children in their homes, the way we relate with our parents as
Yes.
children, and even in our adulthood, there's a way we relate,
Communities.
the way we bury, the way we marry, the way we name. So they are such an important critical factor. You can't do without them. So can they be brought in to have honest conversations? First of all,
Mm.
understanding what is happening, and then what can they do to help. And then I talk about the students themselves, to realize the times are different, and some of the things they have been taught all along may not necessarily apply today. And so they need to have a mindset that is about, you know um, to have that attitude that is ready to unlearn certain things,
Yes.
unlearn certain things. It's like those of us who are married, you come with these preconceived ideas of marriage is supposed to be romantic. You'll always be driving on well tarmacked roads in a convertible, and the lady probably has long hair, and the wind is blowing the hair, and it's all good and nice. And then you get married to this chap who doesn't even have a vehicle, or
She
something
doesn't
happens,
have
and
long
all
hair.
she doesn't have long hair. She's African. She has curly hair, and maybe she's not the kind who wants to buy hair to as attachments
To
to her hair,
enhance.
and yes, so to enhance the hair. So suddenly you realize the stuff that we have learned, the books we have been reading. Chimamanda Adeniche says it very well, that she grew up reading about the eating of apples and European names and so on,
And
and that
snow.
is not the actual story of Africa. The actual story of Africa is Mind Boy by Peter Abrahams, Ngugu wa Thiong'o, Chinua Achebe,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. Those are the African stories of difficult names to pronounce, Ruhweza, Murungi, Adineche, suddenly Tuino Mugisha, you know, you realize that there's an overhaul that is needed. And that's why I really think the time for having a serious think tank is now.
Mm.
And if we don't have one, we have to find a way. to think through, get people in and let them just debate. And I think this is what, if I'm not mistaken, this is what Li Huan Yu says in his book, From Third World to First World. The position of think tanks and so on. I'm told China, the USA have some of the highest number of think tanks. I won't be surprised if Israel has an equally high number. No wonder it has so many Nobel prizes, Nobel laureates, because of the innovative mind that they have. So yeah, those are the things. That's my answer to your question.
So we need to get the different stakeholders first and foremost. We need to invest in research, in debating,
Yeah,
and we also need to invest in our mindsets that whatever you're
yeah,
thinking, yours is not the only correct thing. So we need to listen to everyone. And so that is very good. And I like the fact that you talked about um, all these things about tradition. And one of the things that caught my attention in your book, I'll need to read the quote. Until the lion begins to tell its side of the story, the only
mm,
narrative will be that of the hunter. Yes?
mm,
And you just talked about Chimamanda Adichie talking about all these things she read, but they were different from our, real life situation in Africa. So that brings me to the point of mentorship. Mentorship is also something you really advocate for in your book, and I also know that you are a
yeah,
mentor at different levels and with different organizations. And I believe mentoring is about telling our stories, your why and your how, so that you can sort of align. So that if I look at you, I'm like, ah, but hold on, the Dan has been able to do ABCD. Eh? We grew up more or less in the same environment, so I believe even me, I can succeed. However,
yeah,
the mentorship I believe many people have been getting, as you said, is reading books, which is not a bad thing, but reading books that are not really related to our African situation. It is also important that we read books that
mm,
to open up our minds. But however, I'd like to ask you, because first we need to understand ourselves as Africans, and then find ways that will
mm,
not destroy our culture and ourselves trying to be something else. So how do you incorporate this pan-Africanism, this patriotism in all the activities that you do as a parent and as a leader? How do you incorporate that, but how do you also balance the fact that, I mean, there is the internet, we
mm,
cannot only talk about Africa without talking about the rest of the world. However, as Africans, we also need to sort of spotlight the good where we are. So, in your
yeah,
mentorship, how do you tackle all these things?
yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So two key things come out of your comment. One, mentorship. Two, how do you address? Let me just call it globalization.
Yes.
In this scenario, just in a general term. So first of all, I define mentorship. Well, I borrow the definition of mentorship as a mutual relationship with an intentional agenda designed to convey specific content along with life wisdom from one individual to another. All
Mm,
right. Mutual relationship with an intentional idea designed to convey specific content along with life wisdom from one individual to another. So I mean, there are other definitions of mentorship that we can
mentorship.
think about. There is something about being deliberate to walk the journey of life with someone, you know. And maybe I should add that mentorship is a symbiotic relationship, and
It
it's a
is.
win-win on both sides. The mentor helps the mentee. The mentor is also able to learn from the situations that the mentee presents for clarification or help. All right.
Mm,
So the the truth is we cannot make it on our own. We can't. There is nobody I know who is successful or who has achieved anything that has said, I did all this on my own. No. I mean, for me to access the kind of funding that I needed to pursue my doctoral studies, I had a mentor who pointed me into the direction of what to apply for and how to apply for it. So even from the word go, the mentor provides opportunity. The mentor gives time. The mentor gives opinion, evidence. The mentor allows you to see their life as they walk it. You're able to know that my mentor struggles with certain things, but also wins with others. Um, and so mentorship is life's journey. You don't think that you'll have a conversation and then everything just suddenly falls into place. No, it can't happen. And I can see all through my life, there were guys, gentlemen, and ladies. Although at some point I was a bit skeptical about ladies mentoring men and men mentoring ladies, because I felt that, there's a thin line between there. It could easily flip into a physical attraction and get complicated. But of course, I have been mentored by ladies as well, in certain parts of my life, and so I can't deny that we need mentors, and regardless of the sex, of the gender, you can mentor somebody. All right, so that is one thing. Now, when you look at, I'll start with my life, and I deliberately share some stories I recall growing up in church, in secondary school, at the university. In almost all things I did, there was a mentor or mentoring relationship that I received. Somebody is there to tell you cannot just walk around eating. You could stumble and fall and you'll be such a mess. Someone telling you, on how to dress up and why you must dress up the way you do. Someone showing you their lifestyle, how they manage their time, and you also beginning to follow and to pick up. Someone showing you the opportunities that are available, the opportunities they've taken, and how they've been able to take those opportunities in the workspace, what they did, in order to be able to get to where they are. One such story from one of my mentors, he just used to go to office early, by 7:30-ish, he was in office, and so at some point in time, he is appointed to a place just because he was present at the time when all the others were still at home, waking up and languishing, having breakfast. He was there, So that is it. Mentorship is a journey. Two, I am aware, as you have said, that the reality is that we are mentoring or being mentored in a time when the world is global, Yes, on the one hand, we want to cling onto our Africanness, our kente cloths, our kanzus and gomeses. But knowledge shows you that actually those are not even African, actually. That, for example, the gomesi was designed by a Goan Indian, for I think Gayaza High School.
Yes.
Yes, And so you're like, calm down. What you think is really authentic African or authentic Ugandan traditional may not necessarily be so. The kanzu, we are told, is a tunic, from the Arabs who came and so on. Otherwise, people were either naked or they were dressing up in back cloths, and so yeah, I pick up this idea, therefore, from the peace agreement between the Lord's Resistance Army and the government of Uganda, where there was a push by traditional leaders to apply traditional mechanisms in resolving the conflict between Instead of just taking things to the International Criminal Court, say, look,
Yes.
there are African ways of resolving conflicts that even introduce peaceful resolution and rebuilding of societies and so on. But of course, you now have to balance.
Yes.
One way seems to be pushed as reconciliatory and doesn't punish. The other one is
Mm.
being seen as it just punishes and does not think at all about what kind of society we
After.
want tomorrow in the aftermath, and so there is a balancing that needs to be done. So the annexure to the agreement on peace, which is called the agreement on peace and reconciliation, then provides that we shall apply both. We'll apply
Mm.
both, and we shall even apply traditional mechanisms with necessary modifications, because some of those mechanisms are archaic. You can no longer think them possible in a day when you have mobile phones and computers and so on and so forth, DNA, etc., etc.
Yes.
So human rights and so on. So you need to apply them, yes, with necessary modifications, the way gachacha was applied with necessary modifications. In the same way, therefore, when we talk about Pan-Africanism, the push to Africanize, naming the streets that were formerly owned but named after Lugard and others, to name them, you know, our African names.
Our
That
African
is just,
heroes.
yes, our African purported heroes. That is not enough. There is need to have frank conversations, frank understanding of the fact that we are Africans, yes. We want to infuse African teaching and African ways of life in our students, in our teaching, in our way of life, yes. But some of them are no longer applicable, whether you want it or not. For example, wife inheritance that is
Mm.
practiced in certain African cultures can no longer be seen as the way forward unless there are two consenting parties involved, you know.
Yes.
But it cannot be as a matter of fact, disinheriting of women can no longer happen because of the human rights movement and the equality movement. So even as we talk Africanism and Pan-Africanism and so on, and even as we mentor our people, we need to have that at the back of our mind, that yes, we have Africa with us, it's in our blood, it's in our soil, but there are still ideas that have now come up, that even as you help men to become men and
Men.
responsible adults who take charge of situations, all good. Right now, women like yourself are going to school, performing very well, achieving the highest accolades, and we cannot keep relegating them into the kitchen. I mean, there is now technology that you literally can program things to happen, and you don't need a woman having to be there scrubbing your clothing, and there's a washing machine. She can easily
Mm.
switch on whatever gadgets are available, and the bread is out of the toaster, and I don't know, whatever it is you need to be done is able to happen.
Your
I'm
matoke
sure.
is warmed just before
Exactly.
you
So
eat
there's all
it.
this stuff, and it is really helping us all to make life easier. you know that does not take away from your Africanness of preparing for your husband the meal.
Mm.
It doesn't take it away. So I guess, to answer you, much as we push for these things, we need to remember that there are things that are now available to make life easier, instead of just insisting on certain things that do not
Mm.
necessarily contribute at the end of the day to making our lives easier, but instead literally enslave us to our traditions, enslave us to our customs. And yet, if you tweak it the other way around, you can actually pick up those African ways of life, like community. you know
Community.
the meetings that we have as families, the
Yeah.
get-togethers, sharing food, checking on one another. There are many good things that we could continue to encourage, while there are others that we should we are not
Forward from.
necessary. anymore for us to do. Yeah.